Meow, meow, meow. Hello, hello, hello. All right, waiting for it to kick in so we can check the audio. Host. We have one more parts to complete for the Godhead Complex. There you are. There's that stupid cat. Hello, 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 hello. Da, 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 dum. Do, 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 dum. Da, 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 dum. Da, 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 dum. Do, 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 dum. Do, 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 da, dum. Check out our socials. Join our Discord if you might want to join our Minecraft realm. Also, follow Japan Spits at Japan Spits on YouTube. He was just live today playing some Helldivers 2, fighting for freedom, liberté, and spreading managed democracy across the universe. Galaxy. I think it's Galaxy, right? But I'm upset. I'm upset. I was there in the chat, hanging out, and he doesn't tell them even once. He doesn't say once, follow Japan Spits at Japan Spits on YouTube like the dog. Oh, I am a bit upset. But that's just me. I'm an idiot. They had no idea he was even streaming. Sad. So that's why we're gonna do it. We're gonna get him to 1 million subscribers. We're doing it, Japan. We're freaking doing it. And then had issues. He was playing Helldivers 2. The new update, they have brought the fight to Super Earth. The Illuminates are on Super Earth, and we need to defend and stop them at all costs. I got here and started downloading the update, but I don't know what the heck happened. So I had to reinstall the entire game. Done now. I will not be playing that. We have to finish this book today, chat. So let's get on with it. I'm done yapping. How was your day? I hope you did a good thing today. Maybe many good things today. Hopefully, right? That's the goal. At least two. um, Happy Sunday. Wait, it's not even Sunday. Oh my god. It's kind of like a Saturday for me, but not even. Oh my god, I'm off. I'm so off. Happy Tuesday, chat. Sunday. Oh my god. Man, I'm tired. Here's from Twitter, Rumi. We are stars wrapped in skin. The light you are seeking has always been within. All right, I like that one. That's a good one. We retweet that one. All right, I'm off. I'm done. We're done retweeting and tweeting things. Boy. All right. Put this out of my reach. I don't need it. We're done. Hello, hello, hello. Once again. Dum, dum, dum. Da 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 dum dee 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 dum da 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 dum dum da dum da 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 meow 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 meow. Wait, I lost it. That was not it. Dee 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 da 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 dum. Da dum dum da dum. Meow 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 meow. All right, I think we're warmed up. Part 4, The Limits of Paradox. Once again, here we are. We're reading The Godhead Complex by James Dashner. Number one, New York Times best-selling. It's so hot. It's so hot. It's such a fresh cup of tea. And it's also pretty warm today, actually. I don't care. I'll drink tea on a hot day. I don't care. 23 degrees Celsius here, chat. 23 degrees Celsius. Part 4, The Limits of Paradox. Are the thoughts that run through my head again and again and again the most important or the most meaningless? The less I think about something, the more thoughts and images seem to come along. Even in the darkness of my mind, I see them, I hear them, I feel them. Where are they coming from? The Book of Newt. Chapter 20, Flare Above, Part 1, Alexandra. She paced back and forth on her balcony, squeezing the cup of tea to keep her hands from shaking. See, tea is a good thing. Well, she's crazy though, kind of, right? I think she went crazy. The evolution changed her for the worse. Who knows about Mikhail? I'm not entirely sure about him. He seems to have like some grasp of reality still. But how much so, really? I mean, he has a whole army. He has a whole army of the enemies of their enemies ready to defeat themselves. I don't understand. There's gaps and stuff that we need to know, which may not even be in this book. Let's find out. Meow meow meow. La 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 la. All right, so I was excited about tea. That's what happened. All right. She paced back and forth on her balcony, squeezing the cup of tea to keep her hands from shaking. For the first time in her life, she'd had a dream that was so visceral, so real to life, that it caused her to feel genuine fear. The cold Alaskan night air dried the sweat from her face. She had no doubt in her mind now. Soon, she'd be welcomed into complete madness. She recited the digits, but she couldn't empty herself of the dark, lingering feelings of the dream. She remembered every moment as if it had imprinted itself deep within her cells. Hunted down by a metal machine, fire falling from the sky, arrows plunging into bodies. So that's her dream. Hunted down by a metal machine, fire falling from the sky, arrows plunging into bodies. Alexandra took a sip of tea. It's not fire, it's just the northern lights that have returned, she told herself as she looked out to the sky. But even she couldn't ignore the red parts of the aurora borealis that had grown in strength over the last few days. Red was not a calming color. It was not a color of evolution. Stuck together, chat. It was a color of danger. The color of fire, of war. Get it together, Alex. The flaring discipline be damned. The last thing she needed was going mad like Mikhail, with his constant talk of dreams and visions. Nicholas did this to her. He must have known she tried to take over and poisoned her so that she'd slowly go crazy. That must be it. She set down the tea and pushed it away from her along with the crank-headed thoughts. No, she thought, that's just the madness talking. Paranoia and fear can turn a person inside out. That was it. It was simply the paranoia from earlier, the pilgrim shouting in the streets of Alexandra's guilt. She heard it. Flint heard it. Everyone heard it. The war she dreamed of was just a war within herself. The subconscious mind alerting her conscious mind of the arrows pointed her way. She needed a plan to calm the situation. She looked down at her tea. She smiled to herself. What calmed her would calm the entire situation. She knew exactly how to put out the flames of paranoia and accusations. She grabbed her mustard yellow cloak and what else she needed from the apartment, then left, headed to the guardroom. Part 2. Alexandra went through the digits as she walked between bushes and brush in the midnight Alaskan air, timing them with her steps. The sky above helped to illuminate, defeat the illuminate scum, freedom, liberty, democracy. Join the Helldivers today. The sky above helped to illuminate the very plants she was looking for. Bog rosemary. It grew from the ground with spiky arms to the heavens. Some of the herbs produced flowers, but despite their bog-ridden beauty, she needed only the leaves. After finding it, she snapped off several arms of the plant until she had more than enough to rosemary needles and shoved them into the depths of her cloak. She walked quickly back toward the guardroom as she developed her plan. Would her entry be smoother with a disguise? No. The evolutionary guard had been on heightened alert since Nicholas's death. She'd need to enter the guardroom as the Godhead she was and quell any suspicions for her late night visit. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, she whispered without thinking. The digits were more than just nature's favorite numbers. They constituted the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, the spiral that held the start and end of every single life cycle within them. Trees grew their branches to the specks of the digits. Flowers bloomed seeds to the spiral of the ratio, and Alexandra would help the world evolve to its purest sequence, just as nature intended. Nature was the great equalizer. In a matter of hours, she'd addressed the pilgrims and all those in New Petersburg with her announcement. The official start of the evolution. Never mind her own evolution, or whatever the fear growing inside her should be called. She couldn't give it a name other than what it was. Madness. She'd push this nightmare aside and speak to the people in the morning. Delivering hope and solutions to the pilgrims would be the easy part. They worshipped her and feared the flare. Convincing the villa to get to the first round of the cure dispensed, on the other hand, would take some creativity. She'd worry about that later, one plan at a time. As she approached the guardroom, the building in town that most resembled the maze, she waved at the two evolutionary guards. Excuse me. Not unlike the maze, this place held its own kind of prisoners. Goddess, are you okay? They rushed to her side. It pleased her to know that she still had their loyalty, despite the crazed rumors of the Godhead killing their own. I had a terrible nightmare, and I needed to come before morning. The woman who shouted from the streets about Nicholas's murder. I need to see her. Before she'd even finished, the guards ushered her inside the heavily fortified walls of the building. They were all too eager to appease her. She's in the back, one of the guards said. The musty air of the guard's room choked Alexandra. She coughed and coughed. Mold. These older buildings were filled with it. Same problem. Take two. Run it back. Mold. These older buildings were filled with it. Is it possible to get some hot water? She cleared her throat from the thick air that the guards were probably used to. Of course, one of them led her back while the other went for the water. Alexandra thanked them and followed the guard through the intricate paths of crumbling arches. She tried to hide her disgust at the state of the guard room. It smelled like a warm toilet. Cobwebs gently swayed back and forth in single strands as she walked under them. She wouldn't be staying long, but she hated that she had to come at all. Here you are, the guard motioned to a woman behind bars, sleeping on a filthy floor. Alexandra nodded, putting on her best face of grief and desperation. She held her hand over her heart as she studied the woman's sleeping face. Poor wretch had thought it blasphemy to play out the betrayal of Nicholas at such a holy time, but there had never been a more fitting time for betrayal. Alexandra woke up the woman with slow, loud claps for her abysmal performance in town. Startled, she snapped to attention and shuffled to the back of her cell. She had no pillow, no bed, no pot to piss in. What are you doing here? The pilgrim's empty hands reached below her. I just wanted to applaud your performance. You've got the town in quite a stir over the Godhead turning on their own. I didn't mention you, Armanis, the woman whispered. Oh, I didn't mention you, Armanis, the woman whispered, trembling from head to toe. Alexandra met her absurdity with silence. She would remind the pilgrim of what it meant to be devout, to have faith, honor. After a full, uncomfortable minute, Alexandra spoke. I think it's terribly unfair that they put you in here for seeking justice in Nicholas's murder. The evolutionary guard arrived with her hot water. She nodded for him to leave her alone with the prisoner. What do you really want? The unfaithful pilgrim asked, barely lifting her head. Alexandra mixed the bog rosemary into the water for tea. She stirred it until the smell of rosemary needles intoxicated the air. The prisoner's eyes widened when, instead of sipping the brew, the goddess offered it to the pilgrim. I want you to return to your faith. That is all. The woman hesitated to take it, but Alexandra insisted. Goddess is nothing without her people, and you are special to me, even if you feel your purpose has been overlooked. She accepted the cup. Thank you. You've given me nothing all day. They've given me nothing all day. She sipped the bog rosemary tea.
The air in here is very musty. Dreadful. That will soothe your soul. Alexa watched as the pilgrim drank the tea a few sips at a time. She told her the story of the maze trials, one she knew by heart. A story of faith and deceit. The goddess recited all of her favorite parts loud enough for the evolutionary guards to hear. And when she was done, she left the pilgrim and the guards warmly. There would be no uprising, no rogue pilgrim. Not today. Because within 6 hours, the bog rosemary would release its andromedotoxin, andromedotoxin to its fullest effect. What does that one mean? We look it up. We look it up, chat. Andromedotoxin, also known as granotoxin, is a toxic compound found in various plants of the Ericaceae family, notably in rhododendron species, azaleas and rhododendrons, palmia species, mountain laurel and sheep laurel, and iris species. Consumption of the plant or any of its secondary products, including mad honey, can cause a rare poisonous reaction called granotoxin poisoning, disease, honey intoxication, or rhododendron poisoning. It's most frequently produced and consumed in regions of Turkey and Nepal. It's a recreational drug in tradition. Okay. Sounds about right. Because within 6 hours, the bog rosemary would release its andromedotoxin to its fullest effect. The pilgrim would start to have watery eyes and a runny nose that slowly turned into low blood pressure and vomiting, eventually progressing to convulsions and paralysis. By the time Alexandra addressed the town tomorrow at noon, the woman's physical body would appear as crazy as her mind. Spasms, slurring. If the woman's tongue worked enough to form any words at all, no one would believe a single thing she said. Part 3, Mikhail. So we're down in the remnant nation. Remnant nation again. The berg half crashed, half landed in a space well hidden by tree cover, smoke pouring out the back end. So he's getting to his berg and heading back to Alaska. Colors spoke to him, and sounds took shape as he floated in and out of consciousness. His fever raged. Maybe that little bugger did stab him closer to the kidneys than he'd thought. Everything around Mikhail moved in slow motion. He watched the 6 bergs fly overhead in war formation, and the vapor trails spinning out behind them formed into letters, then into words, but in a language that he couldn't read. And then the vapors from the bergs turned into colors, and the colors hardened into the Alaskan night sky with the colorful aurora borealis. Madness. Mikhail laid back in the captain's seat. He knew better than to close his eyes with so many physical woes, but he couldn't trust his sight, and he could only think of visiting the infinite glade. Maybe this time would be the last time. He took his slow, deep breath in for 3 seconds. Hold for 3. Out for 3. He listened for the sounds of war as he exhaled. Destruction was the only way to create. Death was the only way to bring new life. The people of Alaska would never truly know why the war happened. They might assume the usual power, control, to stop the evolution, and they'd be right on all 3 accounts. But if the war was successful, they would never truly know why the evolution needed to be stopped in the first place. The greater destruction it would cause in the world walked the greater destruction it would cause if the world walked the path of Alexandra. Mikhail entered the infinite glade inside his mind and found nothing there. Did Nicholas have any premonitions before he died? He must have. But dear Nicholas had no defensive wounds on his hands when the body was found. How could someone who sees and hears so much not see his own death? And maybe that was it. Perhaps one could not see their own death coming even when they could see the death of an entire people. Mikhail wandered the infinite glade. La 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 dee 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 dee. He's like just on autopilot over there. Meow 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 in his brain. Meow 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 meow. Part 4, Sadina. She hadn't slept through a single night since they left the shore and made it to her. And it made her miss Old Man Friday. She hadn't slept through a single night since they left the shore. And it made her miss Old Man Frypan even more. On the maze cutter, there wasn't a fire to sit by or anyone to offer her advice. It was just her now. So Sedina and Minho and the crew are on the maze cutter, the boats, on their way to Alaska. It was just her now, wide awake on her cot, listening to the boat creak and moan. She sat up and moved over to the small window lit by moonlight and opened up the Book of Newt. If reading helped Frypan sleep, maybe it would help her too. She didn't have the courage to read it front to back and witness her great uncle Newt losing his mind, but she hoped that flipping to a random page would reveal comforting words. She closed her eyes and her finger ran through the pages until it stopped on page 74 of Newt's journal. Can't bloody prepare for what's next when what comes next has never happened before. His words in Frypan's handwriting sent a chill from her feet all the way to the hairs on the top of her head. He was bloody right. And it's exactly how she felt preparing to meet the Godhead. How could she prepare when she, or anyone on their ship for that matter, had never met a member of the Godhead before? Much less all three. And two that are still left are over there fighting wars, man. how could they ever expect what they're about to walk in on? Dominic's snores echoed louder and louder. Sedina took in a slow breath through her nose and put all her fears into it. Closed her eyes and exhaled like Minho had taught her. The snores stopped. The orphan was a miracle worker indeed. Hey, Trish whispered. Sedina jumped a little. Sorry, did I wake you? She made room for Trish by the window, and they snuggled in the soft bluish glow of the moonlight. No, Dom woke me, but then I woke him up and told him to lie on his side. When that kid's on his back, his tongue clogs up his airway and makes him sound like a beached whale. Yeah, he gets pretty loud, huh? Like those air horns we had back on the island. The hurricanes. Actually, Dom is worse. Trish smirked, but then her smile faded. Sedina? Yeah? Do you think we'll ever get back home? Sedina was afraid to get Trish's hopes up. Every single day since they'd left the island, it felt like it took them further and further away. Not just literally, not just from their old life, but from ever being able to return to life as they knew it. Lacey and Carson were dead, as were two members of the Congress who'd helped plan their escape. Kletter was super dead, and with her mom not well, Sedina didn't even know if she wanted to go home when all of this was over. I don't know, she finally said. I honestly don't know. Can I tell you something without you getting mad? Trish nervously played with the driftwood pendant around her neck that Sedina had made for her. Of course. Trish paused and rubbed her forehead. Don't be mad. I won't, I promise. What is it? I left a note on the island. Trish! Sedina almost forgot everyone was sleeping. Why? What did you say? They'd all agreed when they left the amphitheater that no one on the island would know the truth. We were supposed to pretend that Kletter did all that. The poisoning, the kidnapping, so that when we came back, everything could be blamed on her. I know. Trish held the piece of driftwood tighter. But you had your mom with you, and I was leaving my whole family behind. I couldn't not tell them. I didn't want them to worry. You know it would have killed my mom. Sedina tried to find patience, to keep her promise. She understood why Trish did it, but she didn't want Trish's mom and dad telling the rest of the island. What did the note say? Sedina pressed. I'm not mad, I get it, but I need to know what you told them. Trish was on the edge of tears. I don't even remember. I wrote it right before we left. She rubbed her head again. I mostly just wanted to tell them that I was okay, I loved them, and that I'd be back soon. That we were going on an adventure. Sedina sighed. You're mad. I'm not mad. It's actually perfectly understandable. She opened the Book of Newt. If Congress hadn't been split in the first place, then they could have just told the truth instead of leaving the island in a big cloud of mystery. If you trust that they won't say anything, then I trust them too. They sat in silence for a while, holding each other. Dominic started snoring again. Trish motioned to the book and spoke softly. Did you circle these pages because they're your favorites? Sedina didn't know what she'd meant. She hadn't circled anything, so it must have been Frypan. It's the numbers. She flipped through the book, and to her surprise, there were quite a few page numbers circled. She went through and said the circled numbers out loud. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233. Page 1 is circled twice. I wonder what that means. Maybe Old Man Frypan is a doodler. Maybe, but this didn't feel random. They feel connected, like a code. She flipped through the pages with her thumb again and again, repeating the circled numbers in her head until something literally started to add up. Trish, look, these numbers. I don't think they're just page numbers. Every single one of them, when added to the one that came before it, equals the number that comes after it. Simple math, like 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13, 21 plus 13 is 34. Trish finished in wonderment. But what does it mean? I think Sedina's thoughts conflicted with the reality in front of her. They were just numbers, but numbers that grew and evolved in a perfectly measured sequence. I think it has something to do with the evolution. Interesting. Plans within plans within plans. Notes within books within madness. Pure madness. We love the madness chat. Son of a bitch. Mm-mm-mm. So hot and warm and so hot and warm. So hot. So tasty though. I love tea. Chapter 21. Captive audience. Ooh, we love a captive audience. Ain't going nowhere, chat. Unless you click away. No, please don't. Okay, I'm just kidding. Anyway, moving on. Chapter 21. Captive audience. Part 1. Isaac. So they're trapped in the villa over back in California. That the one that Kletter was originally going to take them to. One of the official ones, because the one that Alexandra is referring to is the secret villa research cure facility out there in Alaska by the Godhead Complex. Well, not by the Godhead Complex. It's in one of the islands. It's off one of the islands off the coast of Alaska, secretly hidden. And they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. These guys here would be upset if they found out. It had been a long night. One bathroom break, a glass of water, and a couple of small loaves of bread that tasted like uncooked flour and sand. They reminded Isaac of when he and Sedina were younger and made sand pies on the beach. Back then, they'd only pretended to eat them. The young assistant that brought the food and gave Old Man Frypan and Isaac bathroom permissions didn't say a word to either of them, and it only furthered the feeling that we're being held as prisoners or test subjects, guinea pigs, as it were. In the morning, as soon as he saw the blonde haired woman who'd helped take Jackie, Isaac jumped up and frantically pounded on the wall. He didn't care if the glass broke right then and there, it's not going to. In fact, he'd welcome it. Hey, hey, what's going on with Jackie? The glass in front of his mouth fogged up. The scientist walked over to him, clipboard in hand. We're still testing her blood. But she's alive? Relief rushed through Isaac's veins. You said hours ago that in 30 minutes you'd know if she'd made it. So she did? She made it? She'll be okay? She's in bad shape, but she's on an aggressive decontamination drip. The woman barely looked at Isaac as she spoke. What the hell? She would barely make it. What kind of experiments are they doing? He turned back to Frypan to make sure he'd heard Jackie was recovering. He nodded, and Isaac knew what that meant. They had to get out of the pot. So what happened to her? Isaac asked the scientist. Your friend suffered from a deadly neurotoxin that blocked her sodium channels. This caused her nervous system to shut down. She paused. You're lucky neither of you had the same thing happen. The word sodium had really jumped out at him. Was Frypan right about the salt in the stew? What does all that mean? The scientist appeared very bothered with all the questions. Tetrodotoxin is a common biotoxin in certain species of octopus, pufferfish, worms, toads. The newt, Frypan stood up. Really? Isaac asked him. The little guy? Oh, yeah, that's right. She got dizzy, right? Jackie got dizzy and fell over. The woman gave her full attention now. Isaac could see P.R. Morgan stitched above the right pocket of her lab coat, and another long set of letters that didn't mean anything to him. I'm surprised Kletter didn't warn you about all this, bringing you all the way to California from your safe haven. There are things you need to know here. It's very common to find birds and other animals dead from newt poisoning. It's part of the evolution that has become an epidemic. Epidemic of evolution? Isaac repeated. Yes, when one species becomes more present than others, the entire ecosystem tilts out of balance. Birds, rabbits, even snakes have lost large populations in recent years. Morgan looked over her shoulder to the lab assistants and held up her finger for them to wait a moment. Isaac tried to make sense of it all, how fragile life could be. Very fragile. Count your blessings, chap. Jackie had touched Newt 100 times at least, and then that bug flew in her mouth and she scraped at her tongue. Right? She put all that toxic crap right in her mouth. Jackie drank from Isaac's canteen too. It was a wonder he hadn't gotten sick. But she'll be okay? Frypan asked. You can get the poison out? Morgan nodded. You're lucky. But Isaac didn't feel lucky. He felt trapped. Got here just in time. Had it been a few more hours, she'd be dead. Isaac felt a chill, then a rush of heat. He needed to see Jackie. Take us to her. He hit his palm against the glass. And Cohen! Morgan just stared back at him. He pounded louder on the glass. Something wasn't right. Cohen is a different case. Morgan slowly unlocked the glass door. Isaac felt a wave of relief. He was afraid she was going to leave him in there. We'll move you to a lower floor. You'll be able to see them once they're both stable. Isaac moved to go, anxious to get out of that room. To get the hell out of there for good. But first, Morgan said, blocking the exit from the pod. You need to tell me exactly what you know about Kletter and where she is. She raised her eyebrows and folded her arms. She knows. Frypan stepped forward. What did you mean when you said Cohen was a different case? The professor could cross her arms and raise her eyebrows all she wanted, but she couldn't deny a glader of old some answers. Something something else from nature's evolution? Morgan shook her head. Not from nature. She let her arms fall to the side. Look, what Cohen has, we've only seen once before. She looked over her shoulder as she motioned to Isaac and Frypan to step out of the glass pod. Good old Frypan got them out of there. Isaac gladly exited that prison, but Frypan moved slower. His eyes didn't leave the corner of the lab where the curtained pod had revealed the flash of metal the day before. Could the Griever have been a figment of their imagination? Maybe they did have some slight poisoning from touching Jackie or drinking from the same canteen. But the other person recovered. They're all right, Isaac asked, hopeful. If Jackie was okay, Cohen had to be okay too. He needed Miss Cohen to be okay for Sedina. Morgan frowned. Where I saw it before, it wasn't in a person. She looked over her shoulder again and pointed. It was on that shelf over there. Isaac traced her gaze to a lab shelf filled with glass instruments and surgical equipment. Huh? What kind of infection did Cohen have? It's a robot infection? What? Filled with glass instruments and surgical equipment. Where I saw it before wasn't in a person. It was on that shelf over there on a bunch of old, I mean, not old, but like, yeah, lab equipment. Interesting. All right. I have nothing. I have no, what? It's bacteria that grows on metal and glass in sterile environments. It's the disease. Well, I mean, it's the evolution of diseases too. Yeah. It must be antibacterial resistance or something. I don't know. Part two, Mean Home. War tactics. Funneling the enemy. That's exactly how these islands, jutting from the ocean like the shoulders of giants, made the orphan soldier feel. They left him little choice of direction, like the ship was being led by an enemy. The heavy wind blew along the choppy waters and made it all the more difficult to steer. We're going to get stuck, he said to Orange, but the truth was they already were. If he could turn the maze cutter around and try again, go back out further west outside of those little islands, he would have. It's too shallow, the ship creaked from below. That's not from water pressure, it's the rocks. He lowered the ship's speed to 5 knots. The wind howled at the windows. They're probably going to stumble upon the other research villa. Orange looked through her binoculars at the maze of islands ahead. I don't know what happened. 2 little landmasses turned into 20 big ones. The rest of the crew were on the deck, braving the gales and gawking at the beauty. Imagine, yeah, they're out there in Alaska on those islands, bunch of glaciers, the open waters, beautiful open sky. Maybe it's a little cloudy. The greenest of trees pointed up from the bluest of waters, shapes and colors that probably resembled the earth before the sun flares and disease. It was breathtaking. But they'd have plenty of time to enjoy the niceness of it all when the boat became grounded, which is rapidly coming. Oh, ship. Orange pointed ahead. A shipwreck. One that looked like it had been there 100 years. Oh, ship indeed. Warship. Minho steered quickly to the right, away from whatever rocks and ship-destroying things were over there, trying to hug the other side of the waters, but Orange was quick to correct him. There's another wreck over there, a newer one. You've got to stay right in the middle. His hands shook on the wheel as he steered the boat between a changing center of water through long, skinny islands, dozens of islands, 100 different paths. The wind pushed the ship back and forth, rougher than the tide at night, reminding them how small and insignificant they were. He'd been prepared for cranks and war, but not quite the wrath of nature herself. Get everybody inside, he shouted. The last thing he needed was somebody falling overboard. Orange scrambled to get the islanders and Roxy away from the railings and below deck. Despite Minho's best efforts to steal to the center of the channel, the maze cutter hit something beneath. An ominous sound rumbled and groaned and scraped. Minho looked desperately at Orange, and she nodded. She ran downstairs to check on things and came back within 20 seconds. Within 30 seconds. Yeah, we're taking on water. What do we do? Dominic trailed right behind her. Minho took the ship back up to 10 knots, no longer caring about damage. Only speed. Grab your stuff. We're docking further south than we planned. Part 3. Isaac. My assistant will take you to the lower level, Morgan said. Old man Frypan still couldn't take his eyes off the black curtain covering the corner pod, but Isaac was more concerned with the look on the young assistant's face. The fire in her eyes hadn't calmed down a bit from the day before. And that's where Cohen is? The assistant only stared at him as if he were responsible for killing her dog or something. And then she walked away. because they know that Kletcher is dead. They don't know how she died, but they know she's dead, no longer of the living. Morgan motioned for Isaac to follow the angry girl. Cohen is in a separate safety pod on the lower level. You'll be able to talk with her through the glass. Isaac pulled Frypan's sleeve to break his stare from what haunted the old man behind the curtain. He snapped out of his trance, and they caught up to the assistant. Isaac didn't care what they called the glass rooms. They weren't for safety. They were cells. He and Frypan didn't have a plan beyond telling Cohen what they'd learned about her illness, and the folded up griever they'd seen, or hadn't. We'll see you for this we'll see you for the dispensing this afternoon, Morgan shouted after them. Dispensing? What's that mean? Food? Are they giving them food? The assistant did not respond. She didn't even turn around. He and Frypan could barely keep up with her. For a second, Isaac thought he saw a braided glass bracelet sticking out of her back pocket, along with a knife. But it couldn't have been. Couldn't. He rubbed his empty wrist. It's Kletter's stuff, her blade and her bracelet. The young woman led the two of them down a hallway, down a stairway, then another hallway before reaching a room with several glass pods like the one they had been in. Isaac exchanged glances with Frypan. There were at least a dozen of them, all empty except the one that held a very pale Miss Cohen. She looked even worse than before. The layout of the bottom floor was almost identical to the lab upstairs. Isaac scanned the corners, but there were no pods with black cloths hiding grievers behind them. Grievers. He had to tell Cohen. Why's it gotta be in the basement? Nothing good happens underground, Old Man Frypan muttered, as he glared at all the pods within the room. The assistant went to the next pod over to set up cots. Isaac, Frypan, where's Jackie? Cohen shouted through the glass as soon as she saw them. Isaac couldn't tell if it was the lighting in the villa or the stress on Cohen's body, but the skin around her eyes looked almost purple. Isaac spoke loudly to ensure she could hear him. Jackie's going to be okay. They've got her detoxing from a deadly bacteria the newt had on its skin. He examined Cohen's setup. They'd given her a bed and several buckets. She was hooked up to an IV. Oh, that's all it was. The newt? Cohen rubbed her face. I'm glad she'll be okay. Us too, Isaac nodded. But he had bigger things he needed to discuss with Sedina's mom before the grumpy assistant made him and Frypan move to their separate safety pods. Miss Cohen, he said through the glass, we need you to come clean with us, with old man Frypan here. Isaac didn't want to have Isaac didn't want to have to tell Frypan about Kletter using the other kids as tests too. With Cohen's illness and possible exposure to something so rare, they all needed to be on the same page. It's not just about Sedina's blood. Cohen's chin dipped and she seemed ready to pass out. I'm so sorry, Frypan. I never intended for you to get wrapped up in this, she coughed. But Kletter's request went beyond just our family's bloodline. It was for as many bloodlines as we could escape the island with. The way Cohen said it, escaping the island, confused Isaac. The island was their home. They didn't need to run from anything there. This now, here, is what they needed to escape. He could only dismiss it as the sickness moving through her, confusing her, but she sounded like she'd been brainwashed or something. I know, Frypan said nonchalantly. This shocked not just Miss Cohen, but Isaac too. You knew? Isaac asked. What? He chuckled. I might be older than mung beans, but I knew this wasn't just an off-island adventure for the cure. As soon as we arrived at the safe haven all those decades ago, I knew that one day someone would come looking for us. It was never going to be over until it was over. Cohen piped in weakly. It's still about the cure. There was never anything nefarious other than lying to Congress and omitting some of the intentions. Having the potential use of control subjects within the same family bloodline if we needed them back on the island. Cohen coughed for what seemed like the 100th time in the last few minutes. The cure is the goal, hear me? We owe it to the rest of the world to... She coughed herself into a fit until she hacked up liquid into a bucket. Isaac couldn't tell if it had come from her lungs or her stomach, but either way, it wasn't good. Yeah, hopefully it's not blood. Hopefully she's not leaking blood from the inside. Isaac watched the sullen assistant open up the second pod and prepare it. Miss Cohen, did Kletter give you anything? Did she test something on you that you might have had a reaction to? He looked back at Frypan to gauge how much he should tell her. The way Cohen blinked slower and slower, Isaac wasn't sure that they should bother her with the threat of a machine upstairs that may or may not be a griever. Cohen seemed to be searching her memory. I tested the sleeping substance before she used it on the crowd at the amphitheater. Do you think I had a reaction to that? It was so long ago, though. Isaac questioned Frypan, but he shook his head. No, it wouldn't have been that. But it is possible that she gave you something else while you were asleep. But is it possible that she gave you something else while you were asleep? Cohen coughed again. No. Maybe testing to see how it would react with part of Sedina's blood? Frypan asked as Isaac watched the assistant walk back over to them. dragging heavy feet. Clutter, Cohen's purple hued eyelids blinked. You think she gave me something else when I was asleep? She grabbed her head. Annie Kletter was a thief and a liar, the assistant finally spoke. Her eyes widened as if she dared anyone to correct her. Is that why you killed her? Annie, Isaac had never known Kletter's first name, but for some reason Annie didn't fit. It was too nice of a name for that woman. We didn't kill her, Frypan said. No, we didn't kill her. Isaac was more than alarmed that the villa even knew Kletter was dead. He'd hoped to use it as leverage to get out of there, but instead the walls were closing in on him. He had nothing left but the truth to use as a weapon. A guy named Timon and a woman named Letty did. I don't know which one actually slit her throat because I had a bag over my head before they kidnapped me, but they killed her. He was rambling, hitting the memory. Where's the rest of the crew? The assistant moved her hand left. Oh my god. All he has is the truth, chat. All he has is the truth. Where's the rest of the crew? The assistant moved her left hand to her back pocket where her knife was. The rest of our group is on their way to Alaska. I swear, we didn't kill her. Where's the rest of Kletter's crew? Her voice had gone from demanding to desperate. I need to know where they are. Kletter's crew from her ship? Isaac asked, trying to think of something. Anything to say about the 8 people that arrived on the deck of the maze cutter dead and beginning to rot. Why? Because my mom was with them. Oh my god. I'm pretty sure he's gonna tell her. I'm pretty sure he's just gonna straight up tell her that Kletter's the one that killed all of them. Chapter 22 Flaring Injustice. Part 1 Alexandra. What a day. She wore her mustard yellow cloak to match the endless crowd of pilgrims before her, reminding them once again that they would all be gods someday if they chose the evolution alongside her. What other choice did they have? But furthering society, she would be placing Alaska back online. Not on the internet of old, but a new human wired system that allowed humankind to accomplish things never dreamed of before. Alaska, the site of the maze, would be the leader of the future. Flint worked to calm the crowd in front of her. The evolutionary guards flanked her tighter than ever. Alexandra searched the crowd for pilgrims she might recognize, from the 6 devout who, like Manas, and like the crazed woman in the streets, knew her secrets. She should have better committed their names and faces to memory, but she had other ways of flushing them out. Her vision flashed red again with fire, red and orange flames, as if her mind itself was the very thing ablaze, and she couldn't escape her own madness. The stress of the evolution was getting to her, and that was all. The stress of Nicholas still having control over her from beyond. His death had become a smothering blanket of wool, scratchier than the cheapest pilgrim's cloak, and she was ready to be free of it already. Her ears buzzed, a tone so high pitched that she almost let out a scream. The flaring discipline be damned. She needed to control her mind. She recited the digits, a thing she was doing more frequently with every passing day. Goddess Romanov, they're ready for you. Flint directed her to the front of the stage. But she wasn't ready yet to address this Sunday crowd of pilgrims, not without Manus. He was her social experiment, her proof against any stigma or whispers that evolution was anything but good. Where was that horned human? Goddess! A man with long, matted hair screamed from the front of the crowd. What of the murder? Who will be charged for the death of our god? The others grumbled in agreement with his outburst. We need justice. Send them to the guard room. Alexandra would calm them today, but in due time, she needed a scapegoat or the pilgrims would never settle. She looked over at Flint, who voraciously tried to hush the Sunday chants. Flare above, maze below. The crowd finally settled. She keeps silly Flint around. He was good for some things. There was a commotion behind her as her evolutionary guard barricade let someone onto the stage. But it wasn't Manus. It was a man in a dark robe, similar to what Nicholas wore. For just a moment, Alexandra felt the scream of betrayal from her guards, as though Nicholas's ghost had whispered to them of her guilt. Her neck muscles seized with tension. How do I look? The figure asked as it came closer. It's Mikhail. Relief flooded through her. You look. She searched for the words, but the only one that came to her mind was hornless. Oh, it was Manus the whole time. Manus, missing his ratty beard along with the horns, looked softer, more human than ever. He winked and gave a chuckle that made Alexandra feel violated. Did he just read her thoughts? Indeed, impressive, isn't it? He said. That cure gave me some fun gifts. Interesting, her jaw tightened. His lips hadn't moved. Just as she had gotten rid of Nicholas's telepathy, she had now apparently inherited Manas's. But she had to embrace the fact that some gifts of evolving would be like those of the maze trials. It was inevitable. Neural networks were part of the evolution. But unlike Nicholas, she had control over Manas. You look like Nicholas in that cloak, but don't be an idiot. Follow suit and you can keep your head. She thinks she has control, but does she really at this point? She made sure to think the words loud and clear before stepping forward and addressing the people. Good afternoon, dear pilgrims. We want to assure you that there is nothing more important to the Godhead than your safety, and that is why we are moving quickly with our plans for the culmination of the evolution. She paused, considering how delicately she must balance her motives with her fears, desires, and survival needs of her followers. She pushed the fire and buzzing out of her mind into the embrace of the flaring. Not only is the serum for the evolution a preventative way to the flare, but it will also unlock your highest potential in every way. Serum? We don't have to drink it, an older man griped, as if they didn't drink every night at the pub anyway. Oh, serum? We have to drink it, an older man griped, as if they didn't drink every night at the pub anyway. Alexandra had hated getting hung up on semantics, but she wasn't exactly sure how the vials would be distributed. Serum sounded better than dispensing, the term the villa had used. The dispensing! They're gonna put the cure in Isaac and Old Man Fry Pan. But they have a different cure, right? Right? This is the secret cure, but what's the cure that they have down in California? Is it a more stable cure? Is it like version? Is it so maybe they have like beta da 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 0.1114 in Alaska, and then maybe like in California they have like version 2.18 of like whatever cure they were working on. I don't know. I don't know how it works. How do we know it's safe? Another shouted. The details will be available soon enough, but we've begun with our first set of human trials. Alexandra waved at Manus to join her at the front of the stage, conveniently leaving out the fact that their godhead had been the real commencement of the human trials. Manus, please step forward. Her eyes wandered the crowd before her, waiting for each unique reaction of those pilgrims who knew Manus as a lower rung member of society. A rung just above the dead moss above the side of the maze, trampled on daily. A horned being, more beast than man, barely more man than a crank. Manus pulled back his cloak to reveal his face and, more importantly, his hornless head. A gasp drifted over the gathered. From front to back, Alexandra smiled as the pilgrims turned to each other, sharing their wonder. You may know Manus as one of you, but he is now raised to a godlike status through the help of the evolution. Bit of a stretch, even she was ready to admit, but no matter, means to an end, all that. The heckling began soon after the initial shock. He's no god, he just got rid of his horns. We don't care about this. We want justice for Nicholas. Justice! Flaring justice! Flint attempted to silence the growing dissent, but waving his arms and shouts were little help, drowned out by the noise. The buzz in Alexandra's ears started again, coupled with fierce head pain. Flaring justice, flaring justice, flaring justice, they chanted, and Alexandra pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth in anger. She simply would not be able to roll out anything to do with the evolution today. Instead, she'd have to pacify their wants for justice. The flare be damned, she'd give them justice. She stepped forward with her hand in front of her in prayer position. Please, settle yourselves. We know who's responsible for the murder of our dear Nicholas. A hush fell over the audience, just as she knew it would. She turned to Manus. Name them, the 4 others who accompanied you. Alexandra thought at him. He shook his head, stood firm, challenging her. It's you or them, she thought, along with all the feel of warning she could muster. Manus stood there in his robe, unmoving and unspeaking. Fine. She'd show him that she wasn't bluffing. Dearest people of Alaska, look to Pilgrim Gilbert, Manus shouted aloud in a deep, booming voice. The crowd turned as one toward a round-headed man, no horns, but with the names of every single glader of old tattooed on his face. Alexandra remembered him now. How could she ever have forgotten those fanatical tattoos? As soon as Manus spoke the name, it was as if the robe of Nicholas transformed his word into law. The surrounding people mobbed the tattoo-faced man, throwing punches and kicking him to the ground. But beneath their grapples, the man tried to defend himself, tried to speak, but the violence only worsened. Alexandra didn't like it, but she let the people have their moment, restraining the evolutionary guards with a glance, allowing the pilgrims to the reprieve of vigilante justice. The it's like a little ceremony, you know? We offer these people as tributes, and maybe next time we'll get to talk about flare evolution and stuff like that, you know? But for today, let's all be little beasts and get our revenge. Japan be sending things in the Discord. Helldivers things. All right, I'll find out about that later. The tattoo faced man suddenly broke free from the mob, every last inch of him bruised or bloodied. It was the Godhead turning on their own. It was a man in the crowd slugged the tattooed pilgrim so hard he collapsed to the ground, completely lifeless. The evolutionary guard dragged him away. She kept her face still. Sometimes violence was the only option. Sometimes an example had to be made. For the greater good. Yes, the rumors are true, she spoke loud and clear. The Godhead has turned its back on its own kind as well as the people of Alaska. This is so interesting because this is freaking true, right? The crowd quieted. Mikhail has murdered our dear, well, not this part, our dear Nicholas, and used the weakest of the pilgrims to do his bidding. She barely got the words out before the people before her erupted in screams of disbelief, horror. They clawed at their own skin and eyes. But he has a whole army. That's why, like, she's gonna be totally justified when Mikhail shows up and he's commanding the army of the remnant nation to storm the freaking bastion. Flint tried to calm them down by yelling one of the chants. Flare above, maze below, flare above, maze below. But nothing of the sort would fix this. The people needed to heal, and in order to heal, they first needed the wound ripped wide open. Keep going, she sent her thoughts to Manus, finding the task easier and easier. You wanted power? Well, this is how you take it. Her ears rang with a piercing buzz as she observed Manus announce the names of another man and two women. The mob went after the pilgrims before the Evolutionary Guard ever had a chance. God killers! Traitors! The people shouted, their voices rising in waves of strength. They nearly murdered the 4 pilgrims before the guards could take them captive. The prisoners were lucky to be alive. Meanwhile, Alexandra was trying to shake the madness from within, the buzzing, the visions of fire. It was over now, she told herself. There would be no more outbursts, no more demands from the crowd. Manus looked particularly annoyed, probably realizing the price of betrayal. Alexandra could hardly feel sympathy. If he wanted to wear the cloak of a godhead, then he had to carry the burdens that came with it. She wasn't done with the crowd. The people of Alaska want justice, and we must deliver that today. She allowed a dramatic pause. We will send them to the maze. For Nicholas. The pilgrims cheered. Too easy. Part 2. Zimena. Zimena. There we go. La verdad siempre saldrá a la luz. A la luz. La verdad siempre saldrá a la luz. She grilled the boys standing in front of her, needing the total truth about Annie. Was she with the group of people when you met her or not? Deep down in the middle of her bones, she knew that her mom was dead. But within her, the center of her heart remained the smallest bit of hope. I don't know. The young man's eyes darted to the 2 others in the room. The old geezer and the sick lady. But Ximena had heard disappointing news from adults her entire life. She wanted to hear this from the boy. You do know. It couldn't be more obvious that he was lying. Weakness. The immune's blood might have been strong, but the rest of his body was weak. His eyes were tired, wounded, like whatever he'd seen wasn't something he ever wanted to say out loud. There was no way he'd kill Annie. Ximena put the knife back in her pocket. She softened. What's your name? What's your name? Me like soften. What's your name? About time, someone asked. I'm Isaac, and that's Frypan, and this is Mrs. Cohen. Isaac. Ximena slowed down her words. I need to know where they are, the people who were with Annie Kletter. Can you tell me that? He nodded, almost looking relieved. They're on our island back home, he said softly, and Ximena allowed herself the slightest sense of relief. Of course her mom and Mariana wouldn't want to come home from the island. With so much to study and learn from the immunes, absent-minded Annie didn't leave them behind. They chose to stay. Ximena looked back to the old man, named Frypan of all things. He had a strange look in his eyes. What? What is it? She asked. The Cohen woman coughed. They all avoided Ximena's stares as if they knew how different she was. a uniqueness that her mother called special, but Ximena felt differently. Every time she met someone outside her village and they learned the truth about her, they ignored her, stayed away from her. Did my mom tell you about me? What is your name, dear? The sick lady asked, and Ximena realized she hadn't told them yet. Not that it mattered. They'd never see her. They'd never see each other again after today. Not that it mattered. They'd never see each other again after today. Her and these guys. I guess Ximena's off back to the village, maybe? I guess her work here is done. I hope that's not something more sinister. Ximena. What a beautiful name, Miss Cohen coughed. I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but the boat, when it came in, Isaac continued, and Ximena froze. Anything that started with an apology and needed two people to explain wasn't good. She gazed into each of their weak, tired eyes. The old man returned a look of sincere sympathy, as if he'd seen all the worst things the world had to offer during his long life, and that he was sorry for it all. She shook her head, wanting to deny it. The omen of the dead blackened jackrabbits. Her premonitions. Despite already knowing the truth, she couldn't stop shaking her head. Frypan stepped forward and put his hand gently on her elbow. They didn't suffer. He said it in a way that only someone who'd lost a loved one could, or many loved ones. Ximena started to cry before she heard the how and the why of it all. Her mom was gone. She wiped her eyes, promising her abuela that she would find the truth. She owed it to her whole village, and it all started with these islanders. Get in the pods, one each. She motioned with the keys in her hand. We're really sorry, Isaac said. But could he possibly know what it felt like to lose a parent, to not get to say goodbye? Little does she know. Well, she doubted it. Get in the pod, she ordered, refusing to look him in the eye. Little does she know his family got swept out to sea. Damn. Part 3, Sedina. Trees, mountains, rocky cliffs. Air is almost as chilled as the water crashing ashore. Alaska. The maze cutter anchored inside a small bay with a rough bump that jolted Sedina. Trish helped her to gather their stuff. Miyoko and Dominic got the rest. Should we bring the other palm mats too? Miyoko asked. Minho snapped his answer. Nope. Only what you need to survive. Bags, foods, weapons. Sedina tucked the Book of Newt into her satchel. We don't need weapons. Naive, very naive. As if her words triggered the entire changing of the world, the skies darkened. Above them, approaching from the wooded horizon, uh, above them, approaching from the wooded horizon inland, were 6 bergs. Bergs! 6 of them! Then the sound caught up, shaking the air and the land, rocking the boat. It had all happened so fast. What's happening? Miyoko shouted, directed at Minho, dropping the palm mats she'd been defying orders to bring. Shit, was the orphan's reply. He grabbed his armory bag. Orange! He motioned something to his longtime companion, a sign language that Sedina didn't understand. Do you know who that is, son? Roxy asked. Last time we saw those things, it wasn't good. Not sure, but Sedina saw a watery look in his eyes that worried her. Something like fear, so unusual for him. It's not good, you're right. Reminds me way too much of the Remnant Nation's war formation. Everyone grab a weapon. Of all the things running through Sedina's head lately, war was not one of them. We've been preparing for war this whole time. That's it's in the descriptions. It's in it's on our posts on the instant. We've known this war is coming, but these guys, they had no clue. They could never have been prepared for this ever. The island where they'd grown up was so peaceful and dedicated to generational growth that war wasn't even in their sphere of thinking. What would Old Man Frypan say if he was here? Probably something like, nothing good ever happens in Alaska. Here, handed Dominic a small knife no bigger than the ones he'd been scaling fish with. Don't be scared. Maybe they'll fly right over us. Or even better, seems like they're heading north, not right at us. The boy shrugged, trying to hide the tremble in his shoulders. How do you know I'm scared? Just a wild guess, Minho responded, and then he handed a small gun to Sedina. She knew absolutely nothing about how to use it. I don't want it. She tried to give it back to him, but he pushed it against her. Armory is an extension of your arms, he insisted, placing the gun in her right hand and showing her how to hold it correctly. Respect, control. You can handle it. She looked over at Dominic with his knife and wished she had that instead. But Dom never had control. Likely would shoot off his likely would shoot his foot off. Selena met eyes with Trish, and Trish nodded as if she could hear what Selena was thinking. Damn, poor Dom. Wait, Selena tried one more time to give the gun back to Minho. You'll be with us. You can protect us. I don't want to kill anybody. I can only use one weapon at a time, Minho said. Everyone listen up. We're going to make a pack run for the woods and go as far in as we can, and then slightly north once we're under cover. Keep quiet and keep alert. I don't think the Bergs will spot us or care about us. Not yet, anyway. Zadina didn't know what that meant exactly. She put the gun in her back pocket, but it felt like it was weighing her down in more ways than one. She wished Minho could have said something a little more encouraging, like, "Don't worry, everything will be okay." Her mom would have if she were there, but Sadina was never more aware of the danger all around. Trish, she reached for her hand as they left the ship. You okay? 6 more bergs whipped past them overhead, a little closer this time. Yoko covered her ears and asked, How many of those things are there? That makes 12, Roxy said as she strapped a long gun across her chest and a knife around her waist. There were 18. I think there were 18, and then 2 of them stayed behind that, that had captured the group. So there's 16. So there's 4 more remaining, if I'm remembering things correctly. Are you okay? Selena whispered to Trish again. I don't know what to think. Trish watched in fascination as the bergs flew farther north. But wherever you go, I'll go. She clasped her fingers around Sedina's and held them tight. Sedina was thankful to feel something other than fear in that moment, and she squeezed back just as hard. She whispered in her response to Trish. She whispered her response into Trish's ear. Wherever you are, I'll be. Part 4. Alexandra. Here we go, chat. The war. The war is on our doorstep. It's here. The bergs. So many bergs. Do 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 do. La na 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 dum dum. Dee 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 dee. Da dum dum da na dum da na dum. Dee 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 dee. Da na 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 dum dum da na na dum. Da na na dum. Da na na dum. Dee 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 da na 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 da 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 dum dum da na na dum dee 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 dum da na na dum dum da 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 dum dee 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 dum 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 da na na dum 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 dum. Meow, 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 meow. Part 4, Alexandra. Bergs, lost of bergs. 6 of them. They appeared as suddenly as a stroke. Dizzy from the spectacular, horrifying sight, she almost had to grab onto Flint for balance. The sound of flying machines was like anger from the ancient gods, displayed with thunder and lightning. Her ears ached from it. The noise was much worse than the maddening tone that had inflicted her of late. Perhaps it had been a warning all along, but what good was a premonition if she could do nothing to stop it? 6 more bergs appeared. 12! Her vision flashed red. Just as the monsters of metal, exhaling blue fire like dragons of ancient lore, spread out in the sky above, the people of New Petersburg dispersed through the streets in a mad panic, as if her body had taken charge, taking over her troubled mind. Alexandra abruptly realized that she too was already running for cover, her evolutionary guard and Flint right beside her. Her feet pounded the ground like never before. A wild foreign feeling of fear rushed through her. She turned to her evolutionary guard and shouted over the bergs above. We have to get back to the. One of the guards dropped to his knees. Get up! They had to get away from the city. A mild grunt escaped the guard's lungs as he collapsed fully onto his stomach. An arrow stuck out from his back. Goddess! Another one of the guards pulled at her, but she looked up, tracing the arc of the arrow. A berg as loud and as bright as the sun hovered above them. Alexandra swore she could see a child holding a bow. A child? Is that all it took to kill her strongest guard? Panic filled her like an aurora in the night sky. It's the Remnant Nation's army, all those little orphans. I don't mean to laugh, I'm sorry. The remainder of the guard yanked her into the building to escape the crossfire, then pushed her through the empty bakery, all of them running to nowhere. But the berg was targeting the goddess with more than just arrows. Explosives, bombs. Walls crumbled around them, the world becoming dust and noise, cracks of cement and the warping of metal, and death. Several guards crushed. She knew nothing of wars. For years she'd played nice with Nicholas and Mikhail, so that their tensions never escalated. As she scrambled to avoid the falling debris, choking on the dust, it hit her like its own explosion. Mikhail. Somehow, in his crank-riddled mind, he'd been able to orchestrate this. 2 guards pushed Alexandra out the back exit. She coughed and gasped for air as they emerged into a city full of flames and destruction. She pulled her cloak tight around her as if it had magical powers of protection. Get me to. But when she turned around, it was only Flint behind her. Flint stuttered. Never mind. Come on. She ran and Flint followed. They bailed on her. She tore through the streets further than the child army and further from the bergs. She zigzagged and dodged things falling from the sky, cinched her hood around her face so that no one could see it was her, their goddess, running away from her people. Gunfire rang in every direction. She considered fleeing to the ruins of the maze, but if she fled below ground, it would surely be her burial site. And so, she ran. She ran, Flint beside her, weaving between the pilgrims who chose to stand their ground like maniacs and fight for their land, and between the bodies on the ground that lay already dead. She jumped over a woman in the streets, eyes glazed over, who she'd seen earlier shouting for justice. Flaring justice, flaring justice. The flare be damned, the evolution be damned, Mikhail be damned. She saw a black cloak that just for a moment made her think Nicholas had returned from the grave with the armies of the dead, seeking revenge. Manus. But Manus, he probably had enough of her, huh? He turned to her with the dead stare of a man crippled by terror. He was alive, but his mind seemed on the edge of flight, the escape of madness. And then she remembered. The boat. Docked along a southern port from when they'd returned from the villa. Flint, there's a. Alexandra stopped at the sight of her faithful servant's expression, crooked with pain. They locked eyes for just a moment before he gave her an apologetic look and fell. Arrows. His knees hit the ground, a single red arrow jutting from his neck. Flint. All these years, she could never even be bothered to use his real name. His dying eyes searched her face, and the greatest shame she'd ever known washed through her every cell. I'm sorry, she mouthed to him. And then he was gone. The only thing remaining in all the world was for her to run. Goddess Alexandra Romanov ran. She betrayed by Manus? I think he betrayed her. I think he shot the arrow into Flint. Chapter 23. Dispensing Disbelief. Part 1. Meanhome. Endless training, constant threats. Everything the orphan experienced in his life had led to this moment, a war that he doubted at times would actually happen. But the bullets firing off in the distance convinced him it was real. Would the Godhead even survive an attack like this? No ragtag Alaskan army of pilgrims could ever be a match for the orphan army. Minho knows this better than anyone, damn. Minho continued to lead the group inland, through forest, over hill and rockslide, Far enough to be safe, far enough from the attack until things calm down. How long does something like this last anyway? Miyoko asked while looking through the binoculars. Minho knew she wouldn't be able to see anything. The tree cover was too thick, which is why they're there. They don't want to be seen either. The orphans could track them if they were too close, right? From the history books, wars can last months, years, decades, Roxy said. Minho would have to ask for one of her grandpa's war stories later. Minho would have to ask for one of her grandpa's war stories later, but for now, he wanted silence. He needed to hear what was happening in the distance. Orange took her binoculars back from Miyoko. It won't last longer than a day. This skirmish will be over by sunset or tomorrow's sunrise. Mino had to agree with her, especially from what he'd heard about the people in the city of gods, lacking weaponry and its people unskilled in the ones they had. Dominic held up his knife like a candle. I just want to point out that I was the only one who voted to go home. But who knows how long it would have been until the war would have reached their home too, right? That's always the question. How long do we ever really have until we have to stand up and fight? Fight for what is right? Maybe just what needs to be done. Maybe it's not necessarily so right, right? What's going to happen? Sedina asked in a whisper, walking slower than the rest of them. Minho certainly didn't love the answer to that question. He could only think of two possible outcomes and figured he'd better be honest with her. Either the Remnant Nation will take over the city of New Petersburg and kidnap the Godhead, or the Remnant Nation will take over and the Godhead will be dead. The group got quiet. War raged on in the distance. Yeah, there's no way that the Pilgrims are ever going to defeat the Remnant Nation, especially with their bergs. Part 2, Zimena. Part 2, Zimena. Zimena. There we go. I just have to say it really quick. Zimena. 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 All right. I'm not just gonna look. I'm just not gonna look, Chad. We're just gonna read. Their building had as many bedrooms on the upper floors as it did safety pods on the floors below, and it didn't take Zimena long to find the small rooms that had belonged to her mom. She sat down on the bed and looked out the window at the dusty sunset, wishing she could go back home and tell her abuela about everything. Cletter, dead, her mom and Mariana buried on the island of the Immunes. How she couldn't bring herself to tell Carlos until she knew more. Until she had a plan. Estar entre la espada y la pared, her abuela would say. Estar entre la espada y la pared, her abuela would say. She was in between the devil and the deep blue sea. A rock and a hard place. Dimana wanted to run back to her village through the desert and the littering of dead jackrabbits to her home and curl up in her favorite blanket and just mourn everything. Drink tea with her abuela and spend time with those in the village who she had left. That wasn't a solution. It was what her mom would call escapism, and she knew that. The world wouldn't get any better by people hiding under blankets. That was one of the few pieces of advice from her mom that still stuck in her brain. As soon as Isaac said the words out loud confirming her mom's death, it was as if all of those precious memories had evaporated in an instant and Ximena couldn't grab onto anything. Carlos appeared in the doorway. You disappeared right quick. Yeah, I'm just tired. You're disappointed. He wasn't wrong, but he didn't know the full extent of that disappointment, and she wasn't going to share it all just yet. He knew that once Carlos found out the truth, that his grief would overwhelm him to a point of no return. It wouldn't just be sorrow for Mariana's death, but also for the life they'd planned to have, the baby, everything. He'd be inconsolable. Dimana spotted a water container on the dresser and handed it to Carlos. For the red clover flowers you picked, although she knew Mariana would never see the sweet sentiment that Carlos brought for her. Hope was important to Carlos. Thanks. Hey, he said excitedly, tipping the water at her like a toast. Got the dispenser fixed. She didn't know what the dispenser was, and she didn't care. Good job. You coming down for dinner? The words reminded her of her mom, finally, and she was glad for it. You're calling lunch dinner now, she asked. You're working for the villa one day and they got you changing already. She suddenly remembered Cletter's skeletal body and thought she'd probably never eat again. Yes, at the villa it's called dinner, and at the villa we respect tradition. Ximena gave her her best sarcastic smile. I don't care if it's lunch, dinner, breakfast, supper, I'm not hungry. Okay, but don't miss the dispensing, he said. I know it sounds lame, but this is history, and they started working on this before you were even born. Ximena nodded. She tried a more genuine smile for Carlos and his work, but she knew all too well the things that had started before she was born. Not a single one of them good. The dispensing, so they're definitely doing something to Isaac Frypian. I think they're changing them into godheads, right? They're gonna infect them with this pure. Dimana tried to portray excitement to Carlos when he showed her all the hard work he'd put into the hydraulic thingy, even if she didn't have much belief in the villa anymore. As far as she was concerned, working for the villa was like working for the devil. La hierba mala nunca muere. La hierba mala nunca muere. Abuela would say in defense of the villagers who did just that. The devil looked after his own. But Annie Kletter was something worse. She failed to protect the people under her wing. But Carlos beamed with pride. You'll see. The whole villa will see today. It'll work. I know it will. She'd never seen him so taken by one of his own achievements. He responded half-heartedly. I'm glad you could fix it. I'm glad you could fix it if it means there's hope for the future. This isn't just hope for the future, Ximena. If this works, it'll fix some of the errors of the past. She had no idea what he meant. As they left and walked into the main lab, she saw another young girl, her own age, with Professor Morgan. It shocked her so much she almost stumbled. Ximena felt an instant connection to this human standing in front of her, merely because they were the same age. How silly. Yet how remarkable a feeling. Ximena, good morning, Morgan said. Before you do rounds in the basement, I want you to take Jackie here and put her in a safety pod down with the others. She's healed enough that she can reunite with the group. Dios mío, she was one of the immunes. Sure, Ximena said, and her eyes landed on Jackie's grass braided bracelet, exactly like the one she'd found near the scene of Kletter's murder. Where'd you get that? She checked her back pocket, half expecting it to be gone. Stolen. Still there. Jackie touched the bracelet on her wrist. I made it, with my friends. Oh, Ximena didn't know what to think of that response. I found one just like it, near Annie's body. Who? Jackie frowned. Morgan didn't seem to care about bracelets right then. Put her in the back pod, the furthest corner. The front pod will be for the rest of us when we come down later to test. The professor smiled. Morgan never smiled. Premonitions of bad things. Come down later to test, Ximena asked. She had never once in all her time at the villa seen any of the lab techs go into a safety pod. They had people like her go in and out with cots and amenities, cleaning whatever was needed. It was as if the scientists themselves were afraid of the pods. What do you mean? The lab techs, too? All of us. Carlos was practically skipping to watch the hydraulics in action. He was way too excited about whatever was about to happen. It made Ximena nervous. She looked behind her shoulder at the others in the lab, all of them shuffling around, busy. They had buzz about them. ¿Qué estaba pasando? What's happening? Just come with me, Ximena said to Jackie. Just come with me, Ximena said to Jackie, then led her down the hallway and then the stairwell. With every step Ximena took, her stomach tightened. Something bad was going to happen. Maybe it was because she had never before seen a kid her age here, or because the lab techs and Carlos were losing their monkey minds about this test they were going to do. Even as they reached the last step to the basement, she couldn't let the feeling go. She pulled Jackie into a corner. What are you doing? Jackie asked. There aren't many cameras in this spot. Ximena pointed to the rounded safety viewers in other places. Safety pods, safety viewers, everything was meant to make the guests feel safe. But Ximena knew it was the exact opposite. Everything inside the villa was a risk. The scientists simply tried to minimize the casualties involved. I need you to be honest with me. Okay, Jackie whispered, then shrugged. The immunes were too trusting, too weak, too kind. Annie, Ximena corrected herself. Kletter, who killed her? Oh, Jackie smacked her head in a funny way, as if they hadn't just met. I can't think of their names. The gentle giant and the weird lady with him. They kidnapped Isaac and Sedina and cut Kletter's throat. It was horrible. Her story matched the others, and she certainly didn't seem the murdering type. But there was something else Ximena wanted to know. And what about the crew on the ship with Kletter? She had only gotten so much out of the other immunes. That her mom didn't suffer, and that they buried her on a plot of land with honor. But she needed to know more, like why Annie killed 8 people, and how. Oh, that Kletter friend of yours was something else. Gave that whole crew a sleeping drug and then shot them in the head, right in the center. Jackie tapped her forehead. Jackie doesn't know that her mom was there, so I mean, she's being a little insensitive, but it's not her fault. Ximena tried to slow her breathing, tried to wrap her mind around the horrific details. She could hear Morgan at the top of the steps. We've got to go. We've got to go, she whispered. She led Jackie into the lower level with the others. This place is really weird, Jackie said as she followed. I mean, I know you guys saved my life and all, but this doesn't feel... She stopped talking once she saw her friends locked inside safety pods. What's going on? Don't worry, they're okay. Just don't make a scene. She walked Jackie back to the designated safety pod in the corner and talked as quickly as she could before shutting the glass door. Listen, the lab techs are coming down here to initiate a test. She said it just loud enough for the others to hear as well. To test our blood? Isaac asked through his glass speaker. No, it's more than that. It's something they've never done before. Mantengase calma. She didn't know if the message to stay calm was for her inner self, her hands shaking, or if it was for the others. Just remain calm. Whatever happens, stay calm. She fought the urge to not lock Jackie's pod, to just release Isaac, Frypan, and Cohen right there and tell them to run for it. But even if she wanted to help them, Cohen was getting sicker by the day, and the devil took care of its own. She needed time to think. The villa workers began to arrive. Professor Morgan came into the room first with a walkie talkie in hand. Why did she need that? Carlos headed into the glass pod closest to the doorway and waved Ximena over, but she was frozen in front of Jackie's pod, thinking of Annie, shooting her mom, Mariana, the others, right in their heads. Why would she kill every single one of them like cranks? Like cranks. They couldn't have had the flare. There was no way anyone from their village could have gotten any variants of the flare. They must have finally been turning on her to see her lies for what they were. There was a chance that the crew of 8 finally realized out there on the vastness of the ocean what Ximena had seen in Annie all along, that she was a poison, a germ, a disease. An overhead light flickered and Ximena blinked. What's going to happen? Jackie asked. Ximena shook her head. She really had no idea. The other lab techs filed in and crowded inside the largest of the glass pods. Ximena locked her eyes with Isaac, and he looked as if the air had just been sucked out of his own pod. She knew the feeling from when she'd been a child, but unlike back then, the villa wouldn't be testing on her today. Ximena stepped away from Jackie's pod, but turned back to her. Sorry, she mouthed. We didn't want to come here, Jackie said listlessly. We voted. We didn't want to come. You shouldn't have, Ximena said to herself as she walked away. Part 4. Isaac. With every lab tech and assistant that came to their floor, with every lab tech and assistant that came onto their floor, Isaac felt like he was drowning in another foot of water. Frypan sat on the floor of his pod, arms relaxed on his knees. But Isaac knew better. The old man wasn't relaxed, not with this many people looking at them like test subjects. Jackie, Isaac shouted to get her attention. But beyond that, he didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, like some kind of hero, but he didn't know that for sure. He didn't know anything for sure anymore. And Cohen barely looked alive. How had she faded so quickly overnight? Why weren't the lab workers able to help her like they had done with Jackie? Isaac turned to watch Morgan in the larger pod next to him. She held a black box in her hand, surrounded by workers, what seemed like every single person who was part of the villa. What was happening? He looked at Ximena, questioning with his eyes, but she just dropped her chin. Morgan nodded to those in the pod and then walked out to the into the center of the room. Morgan, square box in hand, with what appeared to be a little antenna jutting from the top, the walkie-talkie, walked over to Cohen's pod and unlocked it. With clutter gone and your infection spreading, the blonde-haired scientist spoke to Cohen as she entered her glass pod, we have very few options for your treatments. This is not going to be good, chat. This is not going to be good at all. She gently unhooked Cohen from her IV, helped her to stand up, then led her outside the pod. What nonsense was this? They're going to get the griever out, and it's going to sting her. You see, Clutter's work was quite advanced and may have seemed unorthodox, but she was ahead of her time, like many of the scientists of old. Morgan tapped Cohen's shoulder 3 times gently, as if to say, "You'll be okay," before walking back to the large safety pod with the others, then sealing the door. She just left the sickly woman standing weakly, all by herself. Please stand by and await the test. What test? Isaac yelled, but no one responded. You're definitely having her be stung by a griever. Which, grievers have a variant of the flare, I believe, right? Half of the scientists and lab workers watched Miss Cohen, and the other half watched the main entrance, as if expecting a special visitor. What test? Part 5, Ximena. Release the dispenser, Morgan shouted into the walkie-talkie, and every muscle in Ximena's body tensed. The lab techs whispered to each other in anticipation. What is this? Ximena asked Carlos. Just watch. His eyes didn't leave the doorway, as if he might miss something if he looked away for a single second. Ximena turned her gaze back to the middle of the room to see Cohen sway on her feet, barely standing. Metallic, staccato noises from the stairway clanked loudly, but it didn't sound like footsteps. Ximena had been up and down those stairs 1,000 times, but she didn't have a reference for what that clanking sounded like. A hush came over the text. Silence. Clanks had turned into clicks and whirring, loud, mechanical clicking. But there was no preparing Ximena for what she saw next. As soon as the long, spiky, silvery legs came into view, she felt a fear that Cohen must have felt 1,000 times stronger, pumping through her weakened veins. There was a collective gasp in the pod from all the scientists, except Carlos, who just smiled. A griever made its way onto the main floor, different from the ones of old, those fleshy slug-like monsters in stories of in stories of the maze trials. This new version was almost completely machine. Mostly gone were the biological elements that once had slowed them down, though enough remained to give the impression of a living, breathing nightmare. Working, Carlos whispered in awe. Ximena had never seen anything so terrifying in all her life, so ugly, so big and frightening. The griever paused at their pod and hissed at everyone inside with its wet, slimy, beast-like face, then sniffed the air in front of Isaac's pod. Ximena instinctively grabbed the knife from her back pocket, knowing it would accomplish nothing if things went awry. Isaac banged both fists on the glass. I wouldn't do that, Ximena thought. How can you do this to her? Isaac screamed at Morgan, and Ximena could see how betrayed he felt. Ximena understood, feeling the exact same amount of distrust toward Carlos, who continued watching the griever with a fanatic, childlike glee. She slapped him on the arm. This is what you were working on? How could you? She screamed the words. Everything she thought she'd known about him vanished, like vapor in the wind. The griefer rolled forward, using all of his appendages, whirring and clicking with each movement, a sound that sent Ximena's mind to a dark place. Cohen was at first frozen in terror, but she now stumbled backwards, crab walking past Frypan's pod, toward the one in the back that held Jackie. The burst of adrenaline that made her move was a sight to behold. All the while, the griever sniffed and snarled and clicked its legs forward. Stay calm, Morgan instructed, as if the horror story in front of them wasn't happening. One of the islanders, only the old man named Frypan, came even close to following her order. He looked unusually calm. Ximena couldn't hear Jackie over the terrifying noise of the griever and people yelling and shouting, but she was trying desperately to open the pod from the inside for Cohen. But they didn't have the keys. Ximena did. Isaac gave her a pleading look. The keys. She could do something. Ximena reached in her pocket and fingered the pod keys as she walked forward. This felt like the first time in her life she could really and truly help someone in need. If she could just get past. Stop. Carlos grabbed her arm like he'd done 100 times. Like he'd done 100 times before. Always in charge, always telling her what to do or what not to do. She took off his grip, done listening to him. No, not this time. Her hands shook as she reached for the door handle, and she pulled the keys from her pocket. But then Morgan stopped Ximena with nothing but her voice. Just a gentle whisper, she held Ximena in place. It's going to work. I know it will. Ximena could not move. Fear is an important tool in the healing process. Cohen had reached the wall, her back against it, trembling in terror. The griever slowly moved closer, as if it had been programmed to stretch out the agony. As if it had been programmed. Ximena turned to Carlos, who was still smiling. She didn't know if she could ever trust him again. His naive hope for the future had turned into darkness, had spilled over into blind trust in the villa. Blind trust could get you killed. Morgan spoke as if she was giving a lecture to the students, even as the griever inched closer to Cohen. When the body feels true fear, it pumps the blood faster and releases special chemicals and endorphins to each and every part. Amazing, really. Terror boosts white blood cells, and Cohen needs that most right now. She'll need as many white blood cells as possible to help with the incoming dosage. It's gonna sting her. It's gonna give her a big old jab. Mechanical growls vibrated the glass of the pod. Cohen had gone rigid, obviously in shock as the griever crawled ever closer to her. The villa scientists, doctors, and lab techs watched it all with an almost sickening display of anticipation, bordering on pleasure. A reckless power watching their experiment unfold. You're just going to let it sting her, Ximena shouted. She should have followed her intuition when she first brought Jackie down to the basement. A pit of deep regret formed in her stomach. Morgan answered with the utmost serenity. The griever takes the patient's blood, runs it through the algorithm, and then dispenses the cure dose accordingly. A quantum algorithm that no human could match. From the terror to the dispensing, it's all part of a beautiful, beautiful solution. It will save your friend's life. She smiled like a proud parent. This is the only way. What the heck? Oh my god. Is this what the intention of the grievers was always? To cause all this fear so that the adrenaline builds up and they can make a cure? But the immunes, but they were never really immune. Too many mysteries, too many questions. And we're almost here at the end, chat. We have like maybe like 10 more pages to go. Part 6, Isaac. Isaac's heart raced itself to a clatter. His palm slid down the glass of the pod from sweat. Every moment since Miss Cohen first showed him her rash flipped through his mind in a blur. If only he'd known what the villa was capable of, he never would have brought her here. But if she gets cured, then all of this is gonna be just unnecessary worry. But we don't even know. We're in the moment, and the moment is infinite. The griever clicked. The griever whirred. The griever crawled forward, prolonging the agony of every person watching. Isaac had no words to describe such a thing. It was half creature, half machine, full on nightmare. Miss Cohen! Isaac pounded the glass to get her attention. Remembering what Ximena had said earlier, just stay calm, stay still. She'd gone from shocked stillness to flailing her arms, an impossible effort to ward off the griever, now right in front of her. Its glistening, shapeless face leaned in, came within an inch of her own. Isaac held his breath. Cohen screamed. One of the griever's arms pulled back with a series of clicks louder than all the others, revealing a large needle as if it had one horrible finger. In a snap, it slashed forward and stabbed Cohen right at the shoulder. Miss Cohen unleashed a sound from her throat that sounded like all the demons of hell coming back to life, but she didn't move to resist, and a metallic section of the griever's midsection started spinning in place, noisy and clanking. Morgan's voice seemed artificially amplified. It's calculating your needs for the serum. It processes your DNA and your quantum speed. Quantum speed? The griever let out what sounded like a series of short, breathless cries of pain. Cohen winced, closed her eyes. Isaac looked around him, helpless. Tears poured down Jackie's face. Old man Frypan held his hand in his head. Ximena stared at nothing. The monster hovered over Cohen, churning out sounds, but otherwise staying in place. What is it waiting for? Isaac wondered. He just wanted the whole thing to end. Morgan issued more commands. Open your eyes, Miss Cohen. It needs to read your face. But Cohen squeezed them shut even tighter. Isaac pounded on the glass again. The only choice now was to do exactly as they were told. Miss Cohen, just do what she says. Open your eyes. The griever cycled through several motions with his arms, legs, whatever the hell those spiky things were, and raised one at a time until Cohen finally acquiesced and looked, wide-eyed and terrified, at the creature. As if pleased with her obedience, it placed two of its appendages on Cohen's shoulders almost lovingly. With a final click, clack, clack, needles flashed out, sinking their points into her skin. Her eyes closed, and she slumped to the side, lying there, limp. What had they done? The griever rolled and whirred its way over to Frypan's pod and pressed its face against the glass. Poor guy, poor old man. The old man no longer held his head, but instead stared right back at the monster. Isaac could only imagine the haunting memories of the glade that must have filled his head. Of all the lives that had been lost, time stretched out. It was as if he and the creature were reminiscing, a silent exchange, until one of its spiky machine arms pulled back, then punched the glass of the safety pod. It hissed a noise, then slammed another of its arms in the same spot, splintering the glass into cracks. Fry pan! Isaac shouted. He looked over at the main pod, filled with a dozen villa workers. Stop that thing! You've got to stop it! They ignored him, as if there was as if no one would really. They ignored him, as if no one really. They ignored him, as if no one was really in charge of the griever machine at all. Old man Frypan moved to the back of his pod, as far from the creature as possible, watching in silent terror as it punched the wall again, then again. The next one stabbed its way through, spraying pellets of glass on Frypan. Isaac, beside himself, pleaded for them to stop the griever. The lab workers weren't even watching. All of their attention, each and every one of them, was on the lifeless Miss Cohen. What the hell were they waiting for? Then Cohen suddenly came to life, gasping for air. Morgan spoke loudly into her black box. We're done. Insert the code. The fever code. Wait, was that what it's called? Yeah, 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 yeah. I nailed it. Nailed it. Nailed it. Chapter 24. Bogged Down. Part 1. Sedina. The sounds of war swirled around them, and they were some of the worst that she had ever heard. Explosions, gunfire, screams. Minho led them through the thickly wooded forest and kept reassuring them that they were still far from the battle. But it seemed right on top of them. He held up his hand to signal something to Orange, and the group came to a stop. For the barest of seconds, she thought she heard Old Man Frypan rinsing rinsing his iron pan with tiny pebbles and stream water, cleaning up after a fresh stew. But the fantasy vanished immediately, and there was only the harsh clanking of metal somewhere beyond the white bark trees ahead. Clanking of metal. Hopefully it's not more grievers. I don't think it is though. Shh, Minho whispered. The noise grew louder, as if a dozen fry pans had gone from cleaning pans to banging them together. What is that? Trish asked quietly. Adina's heart thumped hard enough to feel it in her ears, and she pulled the gun from Minho out of her back pocket. The crack and warp of metal grinding on metal stopped, oddly replaced by a gurgling noise. Garbling, mumbling. Something's there, Dominic said, pointing his knife somewhere straight ahead. But a lot of good that was going to do. Minho? Sedina asked, wanting him to take control like her mom would have, to tell everyone it would be okay, but he remained silent. The wind blew through the bog trees beside them, creepy pine trees that looked like they weren't willing to leave the ground, no matter what came after it, be it an axe, storm, or avalanche. They were full on they were full on the bottom, but skinny all the way to the top, like the sky had grabbed hold and stretched them as far as they would go. Trees that looked like tall weapons themselves, spears. Minho shushed them again. He and Orange stood still, listening intently. The rest of the group did the same. Roxy obviously wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just held her long gun tightly in both hands. Guys, Dominic broke the silence when the source of the metal clanking came into view. Cranks. 6, no 8. Cranks chained together in a row came through the white bark trees up ahead, like the kind of weird crank contraption they had seen on the berg with those grief bearers. They stumbled over roots and smacked their heads into low hanging branches, but stayed upright, walking closer to Sedina and her friends. They were normal humans, all sexes and ages, but with eyes full of deep emptiness. Soulless. Oh shit. Without hesitating, Minho pulled up his gun and started shooting them, one by one. Trish grabbed Sedina's arms as the cranks fell alone, but also together because of the chains fastened around their wrists and ankles, binding them into one fighting force. Before the last crank in the group of 8 fell from Minho's death shots, another fence row of cranks came trampling through the woods, and then another one, and another one. Crank army has arrived, chat. What in the Iblis is going on? Roxy straightened out her gun and started firing like an orphan veteran, obviously taught well by her adopted son. But Sedina remained frozen. Gun or no gun, she could only hold Trish and walk backwards from the wall of cranks coming at them, pushing them deeper into the creepy pine trees. Dominic and Miyoko walked backwards too. The islanders weren't meant for war, and they weren't meant for whatever this crank stuff was. I told you, Orange shouted over to Minho as she put down one after another in the line. It's the crank army. 2, 3, 4 bodies fell. Sedina watched as Orange, Minho, and Roxy all fired away, all the cracks and smoke of gunfire filling the already misty air. Despite the relative ease of picking them off, more and more waves of them were coming, weaving through the trees, stumbling, but then dragged upright again by the chains. The war had come to them, after all. Damn it. I told you, Orange said again, her gunfire 3 times in succession, each shot hitting a target. More came. What? Minho asked, clearly annoyed as he reloaded his own weapon. How many cranks need to be tied together and marching towards us before you'll admit there's an underground crank army in the remnant nation? She huffed as she shot yet another crank in the head and skipped a rock into the temple of another one. Minho refused to take the bait or even look at her, keeping his eyes on the heads of the cranks he was blasting. Not much of an army without weapons. Orange allowed herself one moment to glare at Minho. They are the weapons, idiot. Roxy shot at them with relentless consistency, like it was a hidden talent no one knew about. She's quicker than both of them, Dominic said. He was right, but he was also wrong. Miyoko pointed out the obvious. No, it's because there's only 4 or 5 cranks on some of her group's chains. Miyoko freaked a little. Where's the rest of them? It was as if she'd spoken it into existence. You remember, chat? Do you remember the fact that there were now cranks on the loose? They appeared out of the nearby bog, crawling on arms that ended in bloody, raggedy stumps. their hands sawed or chewed off at some point. They came anyway, dragging themselves between the pine trees. Minho! Sedina shouted. There were two freed cranks coming at the islanders, but Minho, Orange, and Roxy still had their hands full. I'm out of ammo, Roxy pronounced, and moved to the next chain link fence of cranks with her knife. Sedina stared in awe at such bravery. Minho, Sedina cried again, squeezing Trish tighter and moving away from the trees. Dominic, get it! Miyoko screamed, pointing at the crank closest to them. Sedina couldn't process what she was looking at, all this insanity and terror. For the first time since getting separated, she was glad that Old Man Frypan wasn't there with them to suffer such pain and anguish. Dominic! Miyoko yelled. Stab it in the neck. You can do it. Minho quickly showed Dominic where exactly to stab and slashed his blade. Dom stopped in place like he was going to pee his pants. He gripped his knife and then looked directly at Miyoko, then Trish, and Sedina, and said, I voted to go home, and then he charged the crank crawling at them from the pine trees. He stabbed it in the neck with a war cry like Sedina had never heard. He'd been so loud that it made Minho and Orange stop shooting for a second and turn around. I got him! Dom raised his knife in the air. He's celebrating too soon. Oh no! This is bad. This is bad. They're gonna get him. Hopefully they don't get Dom. That guy. He's doing his. They're all doing their best, chat. Good job, Minho said, and went back to holding the line of chained cranks coming out of the woods. Dom had a renewed strength and went after the next crank crawling from the pine trees. This time it took 2 stabbing thrusts to kill it. Sedina let Trish's hand go with a sigh of relief. Dominic wasn't quite smiling, but a sense of pride had glistened his tears with eyes. Had glistened. Dominic wasn't quite smiling, but a sense of pride had glistened his eyes with tears. In that moment of terror and violence, Sedina realized 2 things at once. First, Dom didn't have something he was particularly good at, like the other islanders. He didn't have a trade to learn and train for on the island and grow into, and even though he wanted to go back home, he really had the least to go back to. Second, Sedina realized there had been 3 cranks missing from Roxy's chain, and Dominic had only stabbed 2 of them. Like a tall, creepy pine tree in the bog, a crank rose up from the ground and stood behind a proud Dominic, hovering with horror. Dom! Sedina cried, but her voice shook and it was too late. She watched Dominic's expression change as he realized what was grabbing him. Fear paled his features, and he struggled, and a struggle ensued. Miyoko cried out. Trish stepped forward as if to help Dom, then hesitated, then stepped back with a wash of shame swept across her features. And just as panic impaled itself within Sedina, she remembered the gun. She knew next to nothing about shooting the damn things except the sniper breathing routine Orange and Minho had taught her. Dom, don't move! She sucked a long breath into her nose, deep into her lungs, and then she put every fear and all the terror into the exhale, blowing it out through her mouth. Fear of the cranks. Fear of Dominic dying, Trish dying, all of them dying. Fear of every last thing in the world. She steadied her gun in both hands, then blew a bullet to the crank's head. Good job, good job. She mustered up that courage. Good for her. Part 2, Alexandra. Far to the south, where she finally couldn't smell the smoke any longer, she stopped to catch her breath. The goddess's feet and lungs had never been so spent, so exhausted. She had never run so far, so fast. Alexandra could still hear the explosions and gunshots and the cries of war in her mind, haunting replays of the sounds that had shattered her heart. A ratchety boom in the distance shook her, reminded her it was all too real. Flint, her evolutionary guard, gone. The pilgrims, the shops, all overtaken. Her feet sank into the soft, swampy ground, and she tried to remember where Manas had beached the little boat. It was near a string of birch trees. She peeled the bark while he gathered their things. She should have forced Manas to flee the city with her. Why didn't she? Nicholas. He'd looked too much like Nicholas. He'd figure it out, recover what she could, perhaps even live on the remote island with the 3 scientists for a while. Once she told them of the surprise attack, they'd surely understand the raised importance of culminating the evolution. Her shoes and feet were soaking wet. Her hands trembled. She shoved them in her cloak pockets. Some goddess. In her right pocket, she felt the spiky bog rosemary that she'd used to poison the rogue pilgrim. Alexandra pulled out the stems and threw them to the ground. The last thing she needed was to accidentally poison herself. She slapped her hands clean of the spiked leaves and returned them to the warmth of her cloak, only to feel something else. The letter from Nicholas she'd stashed away in stubbornness and spite. Finally, we learn he's going to have predicted all of this. Nice. I'm pretty happy with this revelation here. The letter from Nicholas she'd stashed away in stubbornness and spite. Avoidance, not wanting to hear his I told you so's from beyond, or whatever the letter held. But she pulled it out now. She needed to know what he saw that she could not. What were his last words to her? Had he predicted the war? Had this been a part of his emergency shutdown plan? She took a breath and slowly reached into the envelope that had her name scribbled in Nicholas's handwriting. His penmanship was sloppy as hell. He'd always explained it as his mind moving far more quickly than his hands were able. She thought it showed his lack of control. Her heart raced as she unfolded the letter. She had to remind herself that she didn't need to control her own thoughts anymore. Even so, it felt like Nicholas was right there, lording over her. Something rustled in the woods and caused her heart to quicken even more. Her palm squeezed the letter. A squirrel. Just a squirrel. Okay. Get to this letter. Alexandra sighed. The attack from the skies had heightened her fight or flight senses, and there wasn't enough tea in Alaska to calm her nervous system now. Of course, she tried with the flaring discipline all the same. She returned to the letter and, upon unfolding it, saw how short it was. Not even a full page. Did she want a dead man to say more? She was embarrassed by her misplaced disappointment. She was hoping for some guidance, something, anything to know what was going on, what the path was leading towards here and now. Squirrel, the culprit, ran toward her and disappeared up an oak tree. But behind the squirrel was a man. Manus? Manus? He walked with a dreadful, pained scowl, worse than any of the faces of death Alexandra had just witnessed in the streets of New Petersburg. Some faces were indeed worse than death. Cranks. The man emerged from the line of trees and held its arms up, missing a chunk of wrist and two fingers. Alexandra crinkled the letter and shoved it deep into her pocket again. She backed up, looking for a stick on the ground, something, anything to defend herself with. But it was mostly marsh, not even a rock to throw. Nicholas was surely taunting her from the beyond. He walked as quickly as she could between the maze of trees and brush, no choice now but to put her back to the crank and get out of there. Her foot twisted on a jutting root, but she dodged a swinging punch from the oncoming crank. She pushed him away and ran toward a thicker part of the forest, despite the pain lancing up her leg. She yelled the digits out loud as if to amplify their power. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. The flaring discipline was her only weapon. 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144. Part 3. Minho. Someone in the distance shouted, kept shouting, almost melodic against the distant sounds of battle. It took him a few moments to place in his mind that the voice coming from the trees ahead was reciting numbers, counting down cannon fire. This is what Minho wanted the entire time. This is it. His destiny. Remember, he wants to join the Godhead. He motioned to Orange to walk further west. They didn't have enough ammo for another ambush and needed to conserve energy. Trish, Sadina was next to him and pointed toward the strange voice, almost a chant now. Trish stopped walking and listened for a moment. The numbers, she had a weird look on her face, something like relief. Minho glared at both of them. They certainly didn't have time for island games. No, we're going that way. He pointed to the right, west of the noise. But Sadina ignored him and walked in the other direction. The Book of Newt had these numbers circled, she said. Whoever that is, she's chanting the exact same numbers. You're telling me that's a coincidence? 13, 21, 34, 55. Trish counted along with the woman's voice in the background. They're the same, I swear. Sadina turned to Miyoko and Roxy for support. Then we should go check it out, Miyoko said. Roxy shrugged. Lady sounds innocent enough. Minho waited to hear a cannon blast, but he didn't. Fine, but stay behind me and be on guard. He went into stealth mode, watching each footstep to prevent noise as they approached the crazed voice reciting numbers aloud. She appeared, running frantically at them, a woman with long black hair wrapped in a woolly yellow cloak. She was being chased by a crank, probably the last one who'd escaped the chained collectives. Minho positioned and aimed his gun. Drop to the ground! She slipped instead, sliding right between two trees. Whatever worked, he took the shot. The bullet landed home, middle of the forehead. The crank dropped, landing only a few feet from his prey. Dead. Minho scanned the tree line for any more loose cranks. Did we get them all now? He asked Orange. Hope so. She helped the woman get back to her feet, the odd robe muddied and torn. Sedina walked right up to her. Those numbers, what are they? The woman just shook her head and straightened her heavy cloak. Minho pointed his weapon at her. Tell us everything you know about the Godhead and what's going on up north. The stranger looked at each and every person in their group as if they were apparitions. She stared at Minho the longest, then glanced down at his uniform. You're never going to kill the Godhead, she spoke with an unreal confidence. Lady, we don't care about killing the Godhead. Orange tossed a piece of tree bark to the side. It was the first time Minho heard her admit she didn't want to kill their lifelong enemy. The numbers, Sedina insisted. What does 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 mean? 4 isn't a sacred number, the woman snapped, and Sedina took a step back. Trish motioned to Sedina's pocket. Show her the pages that old man Frypan circled in the Book of Newt. Newt? The woman perked up as if she'd been shocked with electricity. She limped over to Sedina to see the ratty book that Frypan had given her. Minho exchanged glances with Roxy and Orange. The three of them were more worried about Cletter's captain's log than deciphering some island Bible. Newt was one of the subjects of the maze, Dominic said proudly. But there wasn't any way in Flair's hell this woman from Alaska didn't know who Newt was. Yes, dear Newt. The woman ran her fingers over the cover of the book. Then eyed Sedina, Trish, and Miyoko with a bit of awe, as if she wanted to touch their faces. You're from the island of Immunes. She seemed dreamy, as if a giant battle wasn't taking place in the background, like she'd gone to an island in her own mind. Yeah, we four are, Miyoko said. They're from. Minho cut her a look that said, never mind where we're from. He still held his gun in a ready position, but had lowered it a little. Trying to get to the Godhead, he said. Any idea how or where they're holding up? I am the Godhead. Goddess Alexandra Romanov. She folded her arms in a way that might have looked powerful if she weren't wearing a bulky, dirty old cloak. Minho lowered his weapon all the way to his side and motioned for Orange to do the same. He hesitated as if to ask, Are you sure? Before following his lead. He didn't believe this woman was a god. She was wearing a common cloak and she sounded just about as crazy as a crank. Looked it too. But she seemed harmless enough. Trish had a one-track mind. And those numbers, 5, 8, 13, 21, what do they mean? They're part of nature, of all evolution. The sequence of life itself, the culmination of the evolution can't be stopped, no matter how many no matter how many wars your people wage on us. She raised her eyebrows at Minho. Goddess, Minho started, but he forgot her supposed name. Romanov, she waited. Goddess Romanov. He didn't bother hiding the disbelief in his voice, but he didn't know if he could outright mock the poor woman either. Dominic stepped forward, his crank killing knife in his hand. If you're a member of the Godhead, why are you hiding out here in the woods like some loon? Miyoko elbowed Dominic. What? But Minho had been thinking the same thing. What good is a god in the middle of a swamp? Alexandra cleared her throat. I was led into the woods and the southern bog for a reason. She moved closer to Dominic and glared at him until he looked away. We don't always know the reasons for our intuition, but I trusted it enough to find myself here, and you found me, the blood of immunes. She straightened out her cloak. Evolution is brilliant like that. She turned and smiled at Sedina. Something about her reminded Minho of the grief bearers. Then, where are the other two members of the Godhead? They no longer exist. Oh? Roxy questioned. I'm the only one left now, the only god. Alexandra spoke loudly and confidently, but Minho didn't believe the Godhead could just dissolve so easily. Something about this person wasn't settling right with him. Only a devil would destroy the other gods, at least according to Roxy's grandpa's story. What's your plan then? He asked. He couldn't get the sounds of explosions out of his head. Knowing the remnant nation, the destruction would be vast. Your city is being destroyed. You're all a part of my plan now. The goddess smiled at each and every one of them, unfazed by the decidedly mixed reactions. At least Trish and Sedina returned the smile. We'll continue with the culmination, and we'll cure the world of the flare once and for all. It's really that simple. Minho wanted the flare gone, of course he did. The flare was still his devil. But something about this woman didn't feel much different. And here we are, chat. Chapter 25, The Last. Here we go. I don't think we're going to be doing Scorch Trials or Death Cure just yet. We'll probably go do some other things first. Maybe I'll do, like I said, I wanted to do Destination Void. Maybe we'll do some sci-fi stuff next. This is sci-fi too. Some older sci-fi from my memories and my nostalgia. But yeah, we will get to Scorch Trials and Death Cure. And then in September, when it releases, we will definitely be doing Infinite Glade. It'll be Destination Void and then the rest of the Pandoran sequence. Am I forgetting their names? There's the Lazarus effect, the Jesus incident, and ascension factor. That's right. Yeah, very very interesting series. I think like very similar ideas to Avatar. I think they might have like got some idea. They could have gotten plenty of places, but it's a similar. Is it? No, it's not. Not actually not that similar. The environmental, wait, no, not even not the environmental. It's actually completely different. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I mean, I wish I could talk more about it, but you don't know. You have no clue. Not yet, anyway. Not until I read it to you. Worship, guinea pigs, experiments. So interesting. Such a good series. Chapter 25, the last, part one, Ximena. Should not have surprised her that the woman who killed her mom also resurrected the grievers of old, but impossibly, she was even more disgusted with Annie after the terrifying scene with Cohen. When the moment was right, Ximena sneaked down the basement stairs without Morgan or Carlos seeing her. Ximena was done with the villa and everything to do with it. She pulled out Annie's knife and sheath, onto which her mom had sewn an eagle, and traced the threads. Ximena had promised to sew the truth through the to sew. But I think we were looking for SOW. They put SEW. Ximena had promised to sow the truth through the land, and she would still do that in her own way. She walked to a small room in the basement, far in the back, that held the electrical components, wires, cables, cords. The room smelled of heat and dust and disease. She stood inside for a long time, her knife in hand. There was no going back. She cut each and every cord in front of her. Solar wires to pods, cable cords to safety viewers, fluid funnels to hydraulic machines. She cut them all, figuring she'd have about 8 minutes before Morgan realized what was going on. A minute for each of the dead crew members Annie had slaughtered, and Ximena would make each of them count. She stepped out of the utility room and moved quickly to the Islanders' pods. Where's Miss Cohen? Is she going to be okay? Isaac asked frantically as Ximena unlocked his pod. Cohen would be okay as far as the power and machinery she'd been hooked. Cohen would be okay as far as the power and machinery she'd been hooked into. She had her own breaker unit on the west side of the property. But Ximena didn't know that she'd ever be okay again. She's in a medically induced coma, Ximena told Isaac before she moved over to Frypan's pod. She paused momentarily and shivered at the splintered glass along the front where the griever had attacked. It had been a close run, Morgan finally shutting the creature down at the last minute. Ximena opened his pod and set him free. Thank you, the old man whispered. We don't have much time. They'll be down here in about 5 minutes. She rushed to Jackie's pod. She wondered if Morgan and the team would miss the Islanders more than they missed her. Carlos might not, but that was all. The others would miss having her body to study and having her on standby if they needed anything, but they never truly cared about her. As soon as Jackie was freed, she ran to hug Isaac. What's going on? I feel like I'm hallucinating again. Isaac was teary by the time he let go of Jackie. Then he addressed Ximena. Thanks for letting us out, but we can't leave without Miss Cohen. Look, I don't care what you do or where you go. Just get out of here before they run some other test, okay? Ximena threw the pod keys into the corner, remembering how it felt when the villa once studied her. She was setting herself free. She turned toward the black metal door that led to the outside. Isaac reached for her. We can't leave without Cohen. Her daughter, Sadina, supposedly has. Cohen's not going to get better, she snapped at him, forgetting how weak the Islanders could be. Even after seeing what they had seen, they still had hope. I think we're overdue for getting out of this, Isaac, Frypan said. Jackie fiddled with her grasp bracelet, avoiding the terrible choice. Isaac didn't stop, as if staying at the villa were really an option. I know, but Sadina and they were going to come and what about the cure? Ximena opened the door and welcome sunlight poured inside. She debated for a second and a half, telling the Islanders the truth about things. She held the heavy door open and looked the three of them up and down. Abuela would have asked what good was freedom without the truth. The cure is just another lie of Annie Kletter's. Ximena couldn't help but think of the silver ring on her dead skeletal hand, the snake eating its own tail, a perfect symbol for the world when humankind continued to destroy itself. She'd said enough. They could figure the rest out. She said enough. They could figure the rest out. The cure is just another lie. She stepped outside and let go of the door. Wait! Isaac and the other two followed her, after all. Of course they did. I get not trusting Kletter, but what if there really is a cure? She looked back at them. If she was going to sow truth in the land to honor her mom, she might as well start here. But they needed to get the hell out of there. Come on, let's go into the woods. We'll talk and walk. Annie Kletter came to our village 29 years ago to give us the cure. The three immunes were right on her heels. So you do have the cure? But Isaac took a moment, probably to gather his thoughts. Why would Kletter tell us that we had to leave the islands to help find a cure, if she already had one and took it to your village? Is it a real cure for the flare? Jackie asked. I mean, it really works? Ximena nodded as she quickened her pace. No one in the village has gotten the flare in 29 years. Then what's the problem? That's almost 3 decades, 2 generations without disease and cranks in... No generations, Ximena said. There are no more generations. She let that settle in as they reached the cover of the wooded hills. Ximena pictured her mom and Mariana. They would have wanted to tell the islanders the truth from the beginning. Maybe that was their ultimate downfall and the reason Annie killed them. The truth was a weapon that Annie took away from every single one of those 8 crew members. But it would be the weapon that Ximena carried with her for the rest of her life. Petter went to your island for a cure from the cure. Oh man, Jackie said under her breath, obviously understanding. The cure needs a cure? Isaac asked. It created its own type of disease. Ximena looked behind her again to make sure no one on staff was nearby. She was surprised at how well the old man could keep up. In my village, I'm the only child born in the last 29 years. I'll be, Frypan rubbed his eyes. You guys wonder why I never trusted any of this. Ximena continued, ducking under a low-hanging branch. They studied me here from the time I was born until I was 6 years old. Then my mom agreed to work for the villa, trying to help them decode the cure. Isaac and Jackie looked at each other. But neither of them could finish their thought. Just as the cure had wiped out Ximena's village of children, it wiped the words right out of their brains. Ximena could only imagine the shock of learning such a thing all at once. The cure might rid the population of the flare, but it also rids the population. They obviously didn't mean to do it, but something about the sequencing that blocks the flare also blocks reproduction. Part of her wished she hadn't burst their hopes and dreams. Carlos and his wife volunteered to help Annie's studies because they wanted children. My mom volunteered because she somehow was able to have me. They studied us in those same pods. The cure, Brightpan scoffed, more like the curse. The truth ain't always the truth. Couldn't stop shaking his head back and forth, as if chastising himself for some reason. Ximena wanted to hug the old man. The curse, all right, she said. The evolution will cause our extinction. Part 2. Isaac. As they trampled their way through the hilly dry forest, he tried to process what Ximena had told him about the cure. How it can save the population while ensuring it ceases to exist. How could both realities be true? It had to be one of the worst things he'd ever heard, and of course he couldn't let it go. Okay, so maybe if Sedina's blood really is the cure for the cure, then everything will be okay. Kletter had to have some basis for coming all the way to our island. Ximena wasn't having it, her face saying that nothing would ever be okay again, and Old Man Frypan hadn't looked the same since the griever of old practically stabbed him through the glass. Ximena walked even faster, as if she wanted to leave the topic behind forever. Or maybe it'll just create a new disease. Maybe everything we thought was right was wrong, and everything we thought was right. Maybe everything we thought was wrong was right, and everything we thought was right was actually wrong. Isaac was already sick of Ximena's riddles. He was thankful to be free of the glass cell, but he had no idea what came next, and he absolutely hated, that they'd left Miss Cohen behind. What's your plan? What did you do back there? She had something in her eyes that reminded him of Sedina when she got a big idea in her head that wouldn't go away. A plan was brewing here. I destroyed the electrical room in the basement of the villa, and I'll do the same thing at the next one. Next one? He didn't know where they'd end up. Mostly, he wanted to run up the coast as quickly as possible and wait at the spot that Minho had designated for their return. What killed Isaac more than anything was that Sedina had been right. Letty and Timon had been right. The villa was a bad place. It was a bad, bad place. So yeah, what do you mean by next one? Jackie asked. Ximena had something move across her lips that half resembled a smile. She then delivered a cutting jab. You all really did live on a desolate island, didn't you? She was breathing hard from the ups and downs of the hike. This isn't the only villa. We aren't the only people Kletter worked with. There's quite a few of them, all the way from the southern desert to the site of the maze in Alaska. Old Man Frypan bristled at that, but didn't say anything. Alaska, Jackie repeated. That's where the Godhead is? Isaac felt like he was practically running to keep up with Ximena and the others. He liked her. She knew a lot, and they'd still be trapped in the glass prison if not for her. He had a feeling they needed her, and maybe she needed them. He had an idea. Ximena, come to Alaska with us to find our friends and see the Godhead, and to see the Godhead. He didn't know what he expected her to say, but her sharp laugh surprised him. The Godhead, she eviscerated the work as she spoke it. The Godhead is just another disease. And that's it. That's all. And I'm just kidding. Epilogue, a final letter. Dear Alexandra, yay! Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you. I needed to know what was in that stupid letter. Epilogue, a final letter. Dear Alexandra, you're reading this note in the event of my death and the event that the culmination of the evolution will be shut down for good. Patience was never your strong suit, but you must understand that the bulk of the experiments were not a success. The cure can work on cranks because you cannot kill a man who is already dead inside. But providing healthy humans with a cure is a risk that's not always successful. I have always told you and Mikhail that you both were the first of the test subjects, X1 and X2, but that was a gentle lie. I didn't want you to look at me as a monster or to look at yourself as anything but a miracle. But dear Alexandra, there were thousands. You were the first successful study of a non-crank at Villa X. I have sent my work across the world in the last 30 years, and the reason I stood firm in the culmination of the evolution being restricted to certain members of society is that I've watched what happens within those who have held too much power through their evolutionary gifts. I had hope for you until the very end. You were my greatest trial, but one person's deity is another person's demon. You once thought of me as a god. Now you think of me as a devil. But dearest Alex, you have not seen the world like I have. There are many more villas than you know. On the surface, as far as anyone can see, the trials of the maze ended long ago. But they had only ever just evolved. Yours in life, and now in death. Nicholas. End of book 2. There it is. There it is. So I suppose that Isaac's group with Ximena are going to go up the coast and they're going to find all these little scientific labs and probably destroy them all on their way up to Alaska. So I suppose we're all going to meet at the final at Villa X up there in Alaska, where Minho and their crew with Sedina have met up with Alexandra to head over to that other villa up there, the secret one, the one doing the ultimate experiments that would cause everyone else to be very, very upset. The probably like ethically questionable ones, right? Meanwhile, Mikhail potentially is ruling in the Godhead Complex, the maze, the side of the maze. But he's also going insane as well. It's all falling apart. It's all in shambles now at this point. So there's plenty more to learn and to discover when we finally get to the Infinite Glade coming in September. Chat. I'll get right on that one as soon as that one comes out. I'm sure we'll read it. Okay, that's my plan. That's the plan so far. Next time maybe we'll do some like short stories or something. Maybe Ready Player One, but yeah, I'm thinking something shorter. We've been doing longer books. We will do like shorter, a couple of things or something. Lewis Carroll poems or something like that. We can do plenty of potential. But that's it for me for today. Thank you for stopping by and listening. I appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, leave any comments, feedback. Don't forget to play Helldivers. We have to fight and save Super Earth. Meow, meow, meow. Liberty, freedom, manage democracy. Take care of yourselves, everybody. See you later. Drink plenty of water. Have some good food.
Dee 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 na 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 dee deem dee dee deem na dum ya na na dum da 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 dum dee 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 deem dee 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 deem. See you later. Bye 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 bye.
Good night. Take care. Be well. Gaming next time. Either Minecraft or more Shadow of the Colossus. Not sure yet. Take care. Bye. See you later. Meow 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 meow.
Meow 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 meow.